There's a strange magic to a rainy night. It washes the world clean, muffles the harsh sounds of the city, and wraps everything in a shimmering, reflective blanket. It can be romantic, it can be peaceful, but that same rain can also be a curtain that separates you from the rest of the world, that distorts what you see, and that can hide things in the deep, wet darkness. When you're out on a rainy night, you are truly alone. Your visibility is limited. Your world shrinks to the small, temporary shelter of your car or the fleeting circle of light from a street lamp. In these moments, we place an incredible amount of trust in others. We trust the headlights coming towards us to stay in their lane. We trust the app on our phone to send a safe person to pick us up. We trust that the person who pulls over to offer help is, in fact, helpful. But trust is a fragile thing, and on a dark, stormy night, a predator can use that trust and the cover of the storm as their greatest weapon. Tonight, we have two true stories from people who found themselves trapped in that rainy night magic, only to discover it was a horror show in disguise. Their nights began with the simple, relatable need to get from one place to another, but they ended in encounters that would instill a permanent fear of the sound of rain on a window and a deep-seated suspicion of a stranger's kindness. Our first story is about a ride that didn't go where it was supposed to, a journey that descended from sleepy exhaustion into a waking nightmare in the heart of a dead and forgotten building. Story 1. The Wrong Ride. I used to work at a restaurant right across the street from my house, a convenience that I took for granted. When the pandemic hit and the restaurant closed its doors, I, like many others, had to take whatever work I could find. An old friend mentioned a night shift opening at a medical office doing data entry. It was quiet, solitary work, and ironically, in the midst of a global health crisis, it felt like the safest job imaginable. To avoid the crowds and potential exposure of public transport, I started using the Ola Rideshare app. My shift started at the ungodly hour of 3 a.m., just after the cleaning crews had finished, ensuring the building was completely empty. I was so bone-weary most nights that I often cursed myself for being so paranoid, so overly cautious. That caution, however, was about to be tested in a way I could never have foreseen. One night, stumbling down my block in the pre-dawn chill, my phone in hand, my tired mind felt a surge of relief. A car pulled up almost instantly, the driver recognizing my location on the app. I'm relatively new to this city, having only moved here last year, so I'm not deeply familiar with every neighborhood. I didn't think to double-check the license plate or the driver's name. I was just grateful for the quick pickup. I got in, and to pass the time and fight off the encroaching sleep, I started playing a game on my phone. But the car didn't have a charger, and my battery was low. Not knowing if I'd find an outlet at the office, I decided it was better to conserve power. I put my phone away. The combination of exhaustion and boredom was a potent sedative. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window and fell asleep. I don't use rideshare apps often. The idea of being alone with a stranger, even a professionally vetted one, always carried a slight undercurrent of unease for me. But this driver seemed utterly ordinary. He was clean-cut, the car was tidy, and he was listening to soft jazz music. There was nothing, absolutely nothing to suggest anything was amiss. I was deep in a dream when he tried to wake me. At first I thought his voice was part of the dream itself. Finally, to rouse me, he did something strange. He reached back and shook my leg. Not a gentle nudge, but a firm, almost impatient shake. Ma'am, we're here," he repeated. I jolted awake, embarrassed to have fallen so deeply asleep. I mumbled a quick "thank you," grabbed my bag and scrambled out of the car, eager to escape my awkwardness. I turned and headed towards the building, and as the car pulled away, I finally took in my surroundings. This wasn't the sleek, modern office park I was expecting. It looked more like a defunct strip mall. The building directly in front of me was a skeletal ruin, half demolished, its interior a gaping maw of darkness. A cold knot of fear began to form in my stomach, a tiny alarm bell ringing in the fog of my sleepy mind. The deeper I walked into the complex, the louder that bell rang. I had expected some lights to be off at this hour, but the entire complex was plunged into an inky blackness. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's under renovation, I told myself. Minutes ticked by, but it felt like an eternity. I was surrounded by a graveyard of construction materials, boarded up doorways, and shattered windows. I was forced to admit the terrifying truth. This was the wrong address. I pulled out my phone and switched off airplane mode, desperately searching for a signal. The bars flickered weakly. I rechecked the text with the address I had entered into the app. It was correct. My mind raced. I thought maybe I could call the driver, have him continue the ride from here since it was his mistake. That way I wouldn't have to book and pay for a whole new ride. But the network was agonizingly slow, the app refusing to load. It was then that I heard it, a soft, scuttling sound from the floor below me. I was on the top level of this derelict structure, and I only knew of one staircase. The thought of confronting a stranger in this desolate and broken place with no easy escape was paralyzing. I assumed it was probably just a vagrant or an addict, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. I tried to send a text to my friends with my location and a frantic plea to call 911, but the message wouldn't send. No signal. I gave up on the phone and started frantically searching for another way out. A second staircase, a balcony, any window I could possibly force open and climb out of. My eyes landed on a faded sign. Stairs. I ran for the door, but it led to a crumbling, treacherous set of steps that opened directly to the floor below. Just then, I realized the sounds from below had stopped, and new sounds had begun. Footsteps. Coming up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ducked behind a large concrete pillar, my mind racing. I remembered the layout of the floor was a large, open loop. My plan was simple and desperate. Wait for him to reach the top, then sprint in the opposite direction, get to the main stairs, and run for my life. I didn't necessarily think he was chasing me, but I wanted to avoid any interaction, any confrontation at all costs. I held my breath, trying to be completely silent. It felt like I was holding it for 5 minutes, but it was probably only 30 seconds before a figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It was the driver. My first thought was a wave of relief. He must have realized he dropped me at the wrong, unsafe location and came back to find me. I started to step out from behind the pillar, but then a horrifying thought stopped me dead in my tracks. How would he know this was the wrong address? I never told him where I worked. My stomach plummeted. I looked into his eyes for a single, terrifying moment. He was calm, but his chest was heaving, his breathing heavy and fast. He was standing there, blocking the only way out I knew. On any other day, I might have rationalized his return, but in that moment, in that place, my intuition screamed with absolute certainty. His intentions were not good. Adrenaline took over. Acting on pure muscle memory, I bolted. I leapt over a low concrete barrier towards the other set of stairs I'd seen. The broken ones. I don't think he expected it. I landed hard, pain shooting up my leg, but nothing felt broken. I scrambled up and threw myself at the first door I saw. I was so panicked, I couldn't even tell if it was a real exit. Before I reached it, the door was thrown open from the other side. A blindingly bright light flooded my vision. My first thought was, there are more of them. Panic surged, but before I could scream, a voice boomed through the darkness. "Police department! Everybody on your knees!" At first, my terrified mind couldn't process it, but as I stumbled back, shielding my eyes, the officer shone the flashlight on me and repeated, "Everybody on your knees! Hands up now!" His tone was so absolute, so commanding, that I dropped to my knees without a second thought. He approached, finally lowering the beam. He was a real cop. He started firing questions at me, but I was in shock, unable to form a coherent sentence. He led me outside back into the cool night air. As my head began to clear, sitting on the edge of the back seat of his patrol car, I asked if my friends had called them. "No," he said. We were just patrolling the area. Saw a car parked outside this building. Nobody has any business being in there at this hour. He explained that while he was checking on me, his partner was looking for the driver, but when they looked, the car and the man were gone. He had vanished into the night the moment he saw the police. It was only then, as another officer suggested I open my Uber app, that the final horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. We moved down the street until I got a signal. And there they were. 4 missed notifications from my actual Uber driver. "Hello, I've arrived." "I can't seem to see you." "I'm in the white sedan." And the final one. Unfortunately, the driver had to cancel. The man who picked me up, the man with the clean car and the jazz music, the man who brought me to this tomb of a building, he was never my driver at all. He was just a predator, waiting in the dark, who saw his chance when a tired young woman wasn't paying attention. I consider myself impossibly lucky to have escaped, and I can promise you I will never, ever get into a rideshare again without checking the name, the car, and the license plate. Story 2. The Roadside Samaritan. I was returning from a business trip at the beginning of the week. Instead of taking the free flight home, I decided to turn the return journey into a mini vacation, a solo road trip. The drive was a long one, about 20 hours total, and I had only booked a single hotel room to break it up. I'd never driven that far by myself before, but a wave of overconfidence washed over me. How hard could it be? The first 10 hours were deceptively easy. I drove through familiar cities and towns, surrounded by the comfortable company of other cars. But as the day wore on, the landscape began to change. The cars thinned out. The towns disappeared from the map. The road was now flanked on both sides by vast, empty grasslands that soon gave way to dense, dark forests. Around 5 p.m., a light drizzle began to fall. It quickly intensified, growing heavier and more aggressive the deeper I drove into the wilderness. My hope that it would stop before sunset faded with the light. I was now driving at a crawl, my hands gripping the wheel, my entire focus dedicated to not sliding off the slick asphalt and into a ditch. For an hour after the sun went down, I crept along in the blinding rain. It was then I realized the road was no longer straight. It had begun to twist and turn, leading me deeper into a forest so thick the trees seemed to press in on the car, their branches like skeletal fingers in the sweep of my headlights. A knot of panic began to tighten in my chest. This couldn't be the main highway. I slowed to a stop on the shoulder, the rain hammering on the roof in the sudden silence. I pulled out my phone, hoping to check the map, but there was no signal. Not a single bar. All I knew was that my directions had told me to stay on the same highway for the entire route. Was I on the right road, just letting my paranoia get the best of me? Or had I been so focused on navigating the storm that I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere miles back? The problem was, I had no way of knowing. I peered out the windows, hoping for a sign, any landmark, but all I could see was the impenetrable wall of forest, turning from green to absolute black just beyond the reach of my headlights. A minute later, a light bloomed in my rearview mirror. It grew brighter, resolving into a pair of headlights approaching my car. They were impossibly bright, an artificial sun that annihilated the darkness and turned my mirrors into useless, glaring white squares. The light finally dimmed slightly as the vehicle slowed to a stop directly behind me. A part of my brain felt a surge of relief. Help! But another, more primal part was screaming with possibilities. A full minute passed. The car just sat there, its high beams burning into the back of my head. Then a door opened. The light was so bright I couldn't see anything clearly, just the dark outline of a man emerging from the glare. He walked up to my window. He was wearing a dark hoodie, and he seemed completely unbothered by the torrential rain. "Need some help?" he asked. His voice was calm, conversational. I asked him if this was the correct highway. He nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I can help you out. Let me just go grab my phone." As I rolled up my window, a detail snagged in my panicked mind. His words were off. He didn't know what road we were on, so how could he know this was the right one? I watched in my mirror as he walked back to his car, disappearing behind the blinding lights. I saw his silhouette move around inside for a few moments. Then he got out and started walking back towards my car. That's when I saw it. He was holding something in his hand. As he approached, instead of coming to my window, he suddenly lunged towards the rear of my car, near the back tire. I didn't wait to see what he was doing. I slammed the car into drive and stomped on the accelerator. The tires screeched on the wet pavement. He jumped back, startled, and I sped away into the darkness, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. For several agonizing minutes, I was terrified he was following me, my eyes darting between the road ahead and the empty mirror behind. But he didn't. He was gone. About 2 kilometers later, I came to an intersection with a sign for a gas station. I pulled in, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. Under the bright, safe lights of the gas station canopy, I called the police. Then I walked around to check my car. And there it was. Jammed deep into my rear tire was a large screwdriver, its handle sticking out. That was his plan. To disable my car, to leave me truly stranded and helpless in the middle of that dark, rainy forest. The only reason I was able to drive away was because he hadn't managed to puncture the tire completely before I hit the gas. If I had hesitated for even one more second, I have no doubt that I wouldn't be alive today to tell this story. The two stories we've just heard are different in their details, but they are bound together by a common, terrifying thread: the violation of trust under the cover of a storm. In both cases, our narrators were in a state of vulnerability. One exhausted from work, the other lost and stressed on a long drive. And in both cases, a predator recognized that vulnerability and used an offer of help as a key to unlock a potential nightmare. The man who wasn't an Uber driver and the man who wasn't a good Samaritan both relied on the same fundamental principles. They relied on social convention, our desire not to be rude, to accept help, to give people the benefit of the doubt. They relied on the disorienting nature of the rain and the darkness to mask their true intentions and to isolate their targets. The first story is a chilling lesson in the dangers of modern convenience and mindless trust. We tap a button on our phone and expect a safe, verified person to appear. But what that story proves is that a predator can intercept that process, relying on our fatigue and inattention to take the place of the person we were expecting. It highlights the absolute necessity of that final, simple step of verification. Check the license plate. Check the driver's name every single time. The second story is a more primal fear. It's about the terror of being lost, of civilization disappearing in your rearview mirror. The helper in that story played on the narrator's desperation. He used the isolation of the forest road as his hunting ground. The only thing that saved our narrator was his gut feeling, his intuition that something about the man's words, his demeanor, was fundamentally wrong. He listened to that internal alarm, and it gave him the crucial head start he needed to escape. Ultimately, these stories aren't meant to make you afraid of every rainy night or every stranger you meet. They are meant to serve as a powerful reminder, a reminder to stay vigilant, especially when you are tired, lost, or stressed. A reminder to trust that nagging feeling in your gut when a situation doesn't add up. And a reminder that the simple, boring act of checking the details, the license plate, the road sign, the name on the app, is not paranoia. It is one of the most powerful forms of self-defense you have. The world can be a dangerous place, especially when the rain is pouring down. Stay aware, stay safe, and always, always trust your instincts.